one of the first things I recommend to clients, especially if I give them like an at-home program and stuff, is to get one of those sets of adjustable dumbbells. It's like there's like two of them, and it's goes from like 5 to whatever 50 pounds, and you just turn the little thing, and it's a nice space saving tool if you have those weights already there.
I think
And
he's
even
got
just
like
take
2 pounds or 3 pounds. I don't think I got
Oh,
50
okay. So you might
pounds.
need some heavier ones, Matt. You look pretty strong. I don't know.
Oh
you
God,
might
I'm
you
not.
might need some
Okay.
heavier weights. We got to get the bone mineral density and lean muscle tissue going here, man.
Down in the valley, moved up from the city. It's a new way of living and I'm trying to get used to it. 1 park coolers, half an ounce of an idiot. Ordered a Manhattan and they call me a Cidiot. At first I hurt my feelings, but it's kinda got her into it. When you move to the country, they can tell when you're new to it. I'm looking at a place, but I'm trying to keep fitting in. It takes too long to be a local, so for now I'm a Cidiot.
I'm Matt Zucker, and this is Cidiot, learning to live and love life in the Hudson Valley. The last 2 winters, Brian and I went to Florida for a few months, and one big positive was that we could be outside and walking a lot. Brian took up running a few years ago, so it was great for him to be able to run 12 months a year. Even for me, never a gym rat. There I didn't just sit on the couch. Nora and I took long walks, especially in the morning before it got too hot, sometimes a mile or 2 or more, and often to the beach. Upstate is great for being outside. 2 to 3 times a week we're out, both off leash. At Claremont, Gregg Farm, Burger Hill, Poets Walk, Germantown. There's so many places to go up here. I've had multiple doctors tell me to walk more than 15 minutes a day minimum, which is easy to say yes to, and not impossible to follow through on. Winter, though, is coming, and we won't be in Florida this year. So I'm getting concerned about exercise. During the pandemic, like a lot of people, we bought a Peloton, which seemed smart at the time. We put it in my studio where I work every day. It was amusing at first. I logged on as Cidiot and tried a couple of classes, including the Cult of Cody. It wasn't really me, though. I wasn't expecting a public affairs lecture, but the chatter got to me, even though I get how wildly popular he is. So since we couldn't travel anywhere, I would instead use the filmed bike rides around the world for exercise. I kind of liked it. I could do a 20-minute ride through New Zealand or a 30-minute ride in the south of France. And then, out of the blue, I'd be jolted by a phone call through the bike. It was my friend Adam calling me from his Peloton. He saw me online. He scared the crap out of me. And also, he and I have never gone on a bike ride together, even as little kids. But he loves his Peloton. A lot of people do. So obviously, last week, I sold our Peloton. I found someone who wanted it much more than I wanted it, so now it's in her safe hands, hopefully getting much more use. Talk about practically never used. I'm thinking of replacing it, though, with a treadmill. I like walking, and light running. This, my friends, though, I'm worried is not enough. I think getting in shape or surviving winter will take more than a brisk walk a few times a week. So then I met Jakob, a fitness trainer, and a former model. On this episode, he and I have a conversation about the Hudson Valley. He grew up here in the Catskills and moved back during the pandemic. We also talk about fitness, and he gives me advice on how I can start to work out. I am not a model for fitness, but as winter approaches, hopefully, a role model for you. Hi, Jakob.
Hey, Matt. How you doing, man?
Thanks for coming on Cidiot.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you not just about fitness, which I'm terrible at and I could be better, especially as winter comes on, but also because you're from the other side of the river. And I do spend probably too many episodes talking about my side of the river and not enough going farther west than, Kingston or Catskill and things like that too. So hopefully you can also help me be more full Hudson Valley Catskills than I've been.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll give it my best go, of course.
Maybe a good place to start would be your relationship to the Hudson Valley and the Catskills.
So I actually grew up here in Cragsmore, New York, which is a small town sort of near Kerhonkson. I usually tell people Kerhonkson just because it's such a small town with a lot of these smaller towns here upstate.
It's got a great
It's
name too, Hudson.
Yeah, exactly. Native American, I think, in origin. And anyway, so I grew up here and I spent K through 12 going through the Ellenville School District over in Ellenville, New York. And then I went to college up in Saratoga Springs at a school called Skidmore College.
Yep.
And yeah, so after that, I moved to New York City and opened a private concierge personal training practice. I'd studied exercise science at Skidmore. And then, yeah, so I was doing that in the city for about 5 years, which was a great experience. And then, of course, we had this little thing called the pandemic that smacked us right in the face. And that caused me to reevaluate life a little bit. And I think the first place that I thought about retreating to was, of course, upstate, just because it was just such a natural place to escape from all the craziness in the city. So I immediately thought of returning to my original stomping grounds. And so we came back upstate for a little while and then ultimately decided to stay once we got our footing here again.
Were you able to find work here?
Yeah, so it was super, it was just honestly a crazy situation. A lot of my clients ended up having second houses here, but we had never really talked specifically about it because they would go upstate on the weekends and say, oh yeah, we have a house upstate, whatever. But we never really got into specific details about where. And so when the pandemic happened and we were kind of all figuring out what was going to happen, we're like, oh, I'm out of the city. I don't know when I'm going to be coming back. I don't know when I can train you again. They were like, oh, we're upstate too. Where in upstate are you? Coincidentally, it turned out a large majority of them had houses either in, Accord, Rhinebeck, all these places. So it just ended up working out really perfectly in the sense that, we kind of just pick up where we left off, so to speak, except instead of being in an apartment gym, we were, and at least in the very beginning, we were outside in their backyard with weights and balls and bands and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a lot of them ended up deciding to stay. And I think obviously we saw that huge transition. I was part of that majority that moved from the city to upstate, except I guess I sort of was coming home, whereas they were just, I guess, moving from New York City to upstate more permanently.
I want to ask you about differences between locals and newcomers. And then also, if you noticed any differences in those newcomers who moved up here, who are the same people, but yet now transplanted, and now they're almost locals.
Definitely. I think there was a lot of dynamics that occurred. It was super interesting, first of all, to see a lot of people from New York City sort of experiencing a more full-time living situation upstate and having them navigate all of the things that come with living upstate, for example, like how to get your driveway plowed or just all these little logistical things that can be a little bit more challenging than being in a city environment. At first, I think everybody was sort of isolated, figuring out what to do. But then as things started to open up and the vaccines became more available and we kind of figured out a way to safely interact, I think there was more of a blending between the local community and the people who are transplants. And from there, I think we were all thrown together very quickly and abruptly. And I think people had to sort of figure out what dynamic was going to be created. In some ways, there was at least to my knowledge, or what I had seen is a large clash in some ways between people coming from New York and how the locals received them. But yeah, so I think it kind of depends on where, but there was certainly, I would say, a clash. And I think that still exists to this day, but I also have seen a lot of nice synergy of sorts. I don't think it's all necessarily negative, if that makes sense.
No, that's really good to hear. What kind of examples of success have you seen? Because I think we talk a lot about the bad news or the backlash and the traffic and the bad behaviors and the Cidiots, but hearing any good examples, I think would be cathartic.
Well, I think certainly from at least an economic perspective, I think one of the first things that comes to mind is, for example, we've had these some new hotels open up recently. One of them being Wildflower Farms in Gardner. And initially when they were opening the hotel there, they actually happened to be, the owners of the hotel happened to be clients of mine. And when they were starting the project, which was actually pre-pandemic, but sort of rolled into the pandemic, there was a real big pushback between the locals and them coming in to put this hotel up. They were worried about sort of it being an eyesore on the landscape, or that it would, all the sort of usual negative things. But I think what was sort of a pleasant surprise was how much effort they had put into their local programming for specifically employing people, not just for the usual sort of wait staff and stuff, but really a lot of the more boutique things, a lot of the arts, the crafts, the real skill sets that people have in the local community that maybe otherwise wouldn't have that large platform. Like they've always been doing, you know, excellent work, either textile dyeing, for example, or incredible like craft food and drinks and things like that. But they were doing it up here and they really never had that platform to kind of show a larger audience. I think the hotel sort of was able to showcase their talents, but in sort of a way that I guess put them on the map, that in a way that they might not have otherwise have been.
And since you've run a business in the city and now up here, are you noticing any differences between, I don't know, how you run your business, or not what you can charge, but like the running of the running of a business, or the hours you keep, or what people
Sure.
need?
I think one of the things that was sort of, I guess, in some ways encouraging to me as a sole proprietor. I don't have anybody else who works for me. It's just me who does the training. So I travel a lot from people's houses to people's houses. So I drive a lot. I think it was really nice for me to kind of be able to provide, I guess what I like to say, sort of like a higher end, like New York experience to people upstate, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of times, especially, people complain about maybe there being a lack of consistency in some of the service providers. I mean, it's obviously industry specific, but I
complain about this all the time. I complain about this all the time.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I think everybody obviously deserves to have just, the bare minimum. I feel like in some ways the bar was sort of, I guess, a little bit low, and just by little things like showing up on time, like just making sure to provide an excellent service and support, and give my clients the support that they need outside of the hours that we have one-on-one sessions. Just something that, just a generally like all-inclusive, encompassing experiences.
And do you have advice for us Cidiots about how to behave in return, right? You're bringing kind of an elevated service quality, but what can I do to meet you halfway?
Yeah, I mean, no, I've had amazing experiences, so I don't have any sort of criticism by any means. But being somebody who kind of has had their foot in both the very local space growing up, but then also have had the New York experience, and I would say the vast majority of my clients are New Yorkers, is figuring out some way in which we can all, I guess, bridge the gap specifically between more of the hyper local community and the so-called transplants, or people who've made the transition to living up here full time. I think seeing that more reaching over the aisle, so to speak, would be really, I think, a really beautiful thing.
Hey, maybe you play a game with me I played before on an episode with someone who grew up here, where I name a place and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
It sounds like a plan, Matt.
All right, well, I'll get to know the Hudson Valley and the Catskills better. Okay, so here, I'll start with something on my side of the river. Rhinebeck.
Bougie.
Tivoli.
Apple orchards, but I don't know if that's
There's apple orchards.
Yeah, okay. That was the first thing that popped in my mind.
Yeah. Hudson.
Ooh, crafty for sure. Crafty.
Catskill.
Hiking.
Stone Ridge.
Where I work, so pretty much I'm just like having flashing images of me driving to all my clients' houses. So I would say definitely, exercise, but that's very specific to my reality.
That's cool. Kerhonkson.
Oh, home, definitely home for sure.
Olive Bridge.
Hiking again, definitely hiking.
Monticello.
Ooh, disparity for sure.
Livingston Manor.
Actually, I haven't spent much time at all in Livingston Manor. I'm not really
I've
sure
never been.
I think like passing through it certainly, and on the way to clients. But okay, fly fishing, certainly that's what I associate. I've seen a lot of fly fishing signs, and I know they have a deep history when it comes to the fly fishing community. But I'm not a fly fisherman, so I can't comment exclusively on that.
Hobart.
Honestly, don't even know where that is.
It's this book village way up north I went to.
Oh wow.
Millbrook.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah. Wappingers Falls.
There's a really great Indian restaurant there called, I think it's called Caravali, I believe, is the Indian restaurant there. It's wonderful. Anyway, that's what I associate with Wappingers.
New Paltz.
Mohawk.
And What's your favorite place in the Hudson Valley? Like, what's your go-to place for inspiration? Kind of your secret place that we all should
Yeah,
know about.
I think personally for myself, and this is a very special place to me, is kind of where I've done a lot of my thinking, and especially during any life transition I was ever going through. Even in the city, I would come up here specifically, and it's Sam's Point. It's in Cragsmore, where I live, and yeah, it's sort of on the same ridge line as Mohonk, but mostly people don't come to this side because it's a little bit tucked away and further away. Unless you like know about it, they have a wonderful lake up there called Lake Marantanza that is just gorgeous, and they have this beautiful just look off, and everything about it. Just the energy is really quite special. I can't really encapsulate it in words. It's just something that you have to, I think, experience. So I highly recommend taking a trip there if you want to do some deep thinking and get outside and into the elements.
Nice. I'll put a link in my show notes. So I really asked you on the show for help
Yes.
because, my husband is a runner. He's running the marathon. I am lazy. Winter's coming. I just sold my Peloton on Upstate Curious. Like, I am not ready. So I guess my question would be if you have some advice for me about how to get my butt off the winter. I mean, as most of the audience knows, I'm 50 plus.
Okay.
I have trouble with discipline,
Okay.
but I'm very curious. So I'm willing to try new things or experiments or
Got it.
things like that. So you could definitely do out of the box stuff or the proven stuff for the archetype that
Totally.
is Matt.
Yeah. So, well, it's funny. So, Matt, you're sort of the primary group of people that I do work with. I would say 50, even up to 80 years old. So, sort of 50 to
I'm not
80
80. I'm
age
not
range.
80.
No, nowhere close to 80. So, just giving you the age range, 50 to 80 is probably, I would say, the primary. But anyway, no, but on a serious note, I think, first of all, I think, especially when it comes to discipline, even if you're not a morning person, I don't think you need to be somebody who gets up at 5 in the morning. I'm not saying you need to do that, but I think doing your workout first thing in the morning, at least for my clients who can do their workout ideally before they start the workday, I think that's one of the primary ways to stay consistent. And I've just, even anecdotally, I've noticed the people who schedule sessions the first half of the day tend to be more disciplined and reliable over time, just because you get it done first thing in the morning. It kind of, if you hate exercise, I guess you could call it, do the worst first, so to speak, or what do they say, eat the frog method, right? Where you do like
Yeah.
the most
Yeah, that
challenging
makes
part of your
sense
day
too. Like I
first.
like breakfast meetings because people don't cancel them. They don't have time to cancel them.
Exactly. So I think that would be 100% the first. Yeah, if you can, if possible, even if it's just waking up 30 minutes before work, get something in, get a quick 30-minute workout in. I think would be the first thing. Do it first thing in the morning.
Got it. Then what? What do I do?
Okay, so from there, I would say, depending on if you have an at-home setup or not, I would highly recommend getting yourself a. Do you have a setup? What is your setup?
I don't know. Bryant's got some random weights lying around of like,
Okay,
some weights, and I saw a yoga mat or two or something like that. So
perfect.
there's odds
Okay.
and ends, but I'm willing to buy things. But yes, I've got
Okay, if you're
that
willing
stuff.
to buy, okay, cool. So even if you had those dumbbells, one of the first things I recommend to clients, especially if I give them like an at-home program and stuff, is to get one of those sets of adjustable dumbbells. It's like there's two of them, and it's goes from like 5 to whatever 50 pounds, and you just turn the little thing, and it's a nice space saving tool. If you have those weights already there,
I think
and
he's
even
got
just
like
take.
2 pounds or 3 pounds. I don't think I got
Oh,
50
okay. So you might
pounds.
need some heavier ones, Matt. You look pretty strong. I don't know.
Oh
you
God,
might
I'm
you
not.
might need some
Okay.
heavier weights. We got to get the bone mineral density and lean muscle tissue going here, man. But yeah, so I would say for sure a set of adjustable dumbbells just for space savings. And then, I mean, really just keeping it simple. I think people overcomplicate what they need to do specifically for strength training. I think obviously it's important to do the correct exercises, but I would argue that as long as you're doing the basics, so pick one exercise in every plane of motion. So, for example, any sort of standing overhead pressing movement, for example, then a horizontal laying pressing movement, for example, a hip hinge, which would be an example of something like a deadlift, or perhaps a squat could also count as a hip hinge, and then also a horizontal row, for example, and then
I never thought
if
about
you,
this, about the different angles or planes, as you
yeah,
said,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
vertical y-axis and x-axis angle things. That might
sure.
be an easier way to remember which one to do.
And I think really the primary reason to kind of having it broken down into these planes of motion is because you're going to target every single muscle group. So if
Yeah.
you can break it down into the plane of motion, for example, for like an overhead pressing motion movement, you're going to be using your shoulders, your triceps. From a horizontal laying position, you're going to be using your chest, shoulders, triceps. So it's like you're breaking down each plane of motion into the subsequent muscle groups. So just keeping it simple. And again, you can use a lot of those household name exercises. There's nothing wrong with going back to the basics, like planks, push-ups, bench press, overhead press, just keeping it really simple. And as long as it's safe for your body, you're going to be good to go. I think the most important thing is preventing yourself from getting injured. So just don't overdo it. There's nobody to impress. Just take it slow, keep your form perfect, and work within your comfort level, I would say is the biggest takeaway.
Okay, what about movement, especially in winter? We all sit around on the couch watching the fire. Do you have any recommendation about, walking or running or trotting? And does it matter if I do it before or after the weights or the strength training or the movement?
I don't think necessarily the timing matters too much, but as long as you're being consistent. I mean, especially upstate, it can be kind of challenging with the winter blues to kind of motivate yourself to get outside. So if you are somebody who is a fan of using an exercise bike, I think that's perfectly acceptable. For a lot of us, that's not exactly appealing to be on
God,
the
I hate
Peloton.
it.
So
I don't know how people love it, that cult.
right.
Yeah.
No, so if you're somebody like that, then listen, by all means, I highly encourage people to get outside into the elements, because that not only is that going to be your exercise, your cardiovascular exercise, but you're also going to be getting the psychological benefit of just being in the fresh air and having the light hit your eyes and just all those supplemental benefits that come with it. So if running outside is too much on your knees or back, I think a brisk walk is perfectly acceptable. You can get your heart rate into a zone that's really
what I do
excellent for your
sometimes? I
metabolic
take my
health.
dog to, I'm sure there's places by you like at Burger Hill and Rhinebeck, and it's a
Okay.
really nice hike uphill.
Okay.
And I think there's some runners that run it every morning too.
Yeah.
But these kind of hikes that are not flat kind of are good.
Exactly.
They're kind of a good workout even if they're not a huge distance.
Totally. I was going to say incline, that's going to get your heart rate up and be incredible for your metabolic health. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's sustained too. Something that's like, you can keep yourself walking for 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever you can swing. But yeah, I think consistency is the most important, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day. So just doing something as opposed to writing it off completely. Maybe you had planned an hour workout in your schedule, and if it doesn't work out, instead of just scratching it entirely, use the 10 minutes that you have. I think that's still perfectly acceptable.
And what about in bad weather? Do you have any like go-to places you send people?
Honestly, not necessarily throw on a raincoat. No, I don't know. I just like, honestly, no, I mean, you can still get outside. I mean, that's a fun way to challenge yourself too, right? Like if getting outside in bad weather, right? Like that makes you feel very, very accomplished. You come inside and then you can cozy up by the fire. There's a little bit of getting
Oh,
uncomfortable, I
funny.
think is good for us. Yeah. This is a great book I read semi-recently called The Comfort Crisis. I forgot who it's by, but anyway, he speaks a lot about how those principles can really build resilience in us and are good for us.
That's great. Okay, so we all like the idea of fitness, but like for you, talking to us, what do you think is like what's the bottom line? What's the big takeaway for us?
Yeah, big takeaway, I think definitely is to keep it simple, and less is more, which might sound sort of somewhat counter when it comes to training and stuff, because we always hear these anecdotes of, push hard. And I think a lot of our culture sort of promotes this sort of no pain, no gain idea. And while there is good intention to the idea of being consistent and pushing yourself, I think most people end up overdoing it. And I think they develop a relationship with exercise that's, they do a few really hard class workouts and it takes it all out of them. They're sore for days and they never want to go back again because it's just, it's uncomfortable. They overdid it. So I think really working within your comfort zone, and even just doing a little bit, you can make incredible improvements to your fitness by just doing, like I said, even 10 or 15 minutes a day. Ideally, you'd want to eventually work yourself up to like a 40-minute strength training workout 3 times a week and maybe some supplemental cardio. But I think especially just in the beginning, to keep yourself engaged and accountable is to really work within your current fitness levels. I had this one client he was an older gentleman. He really could only tolerate, I'd say at most like 20 minutes of really light stretching. And his primary goal was 75 at the time, was just to be able to get up off of the floor. And because he just had a granddaughter recently, his son had a daughter. And so he wanted to be able to get up off the floor, onto the floor, be able to play with her. That was his like objective. So we worked,
that's a good goal.
Right, yeah, and it's for somebody like that, he was really challenged, he could only sit in a chair. It took us a couple years to get to that point, and we never did it through any intense, grueling thing, especially in the beginning. We just literally worked 10 minutes a day on stretching, and then gradually over time, of course, we gotten to the place where he was doing several repetitions of different exercises and stuff. I still meet with this guy like 3 times a week. And it's funny, he's able to like even do push-ups now, which is like insane because at this point he's almost 80 years old. He's a retired math professor and he can just like he can pump out sets of 20 push-ups. It's literally absurd. Where when we first started 3 years ago, he was like barely able to get onto the floor. So it blows my mind.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I think it's testament that you can make a large improvement by just implementing little changes in your life, and it doesn't need to be like an all or none thing. So
Well, that's great. Thanks.
Down in the valley, moved up from the city. It's a new way of living and I'm trying to get used to it. 1 park noodles, half an ounce of an idiot. Ordered a Manhattan and they call me a Cidiot. At first it hurt my feelings, but it's kinda got a ring to it. When you move to the country, they can tell when you're new to it. I'm looking at a place, but I'm trying to keep fitting in. It takes long to be a local, so for now I'm a Cidiot.